Hey, hello Bio 2. We are going to kick off the second semester with chapter 26, and it's going to be titled Sponges and Cnidarians, and these are going to be our first two groups of animals that we're going to look at. So sponges are actually animals, and cnidarians, you might not know what this means now, but you will by the end of this chapter. And so this is what the focus of this chapter is going to be on. However, our first section of this chapter is going to introduce us to terms, or it's going to introduce us to what exactly the animal kingdom is, some terms we're going to need to know that will kind of help us better understand everything we're going to see from here on out in terms of animals. And the big question of this chapter is going to be, or of this section is going to be, what characteristics do all animals share? But before we even make it to that point, we just need to give ourselves a definition of what is an animal. And so the definition of an animal is that they are multicellular, meaning they're made up of multiple cells, eukaryotic, which meaning they have a nucleus, heterotrophs, meaning they can't make their own food, whose cells lack cell walls. And then, so those are the main kind of key characteristics that are going to distinguish animals. And when we look at animals, we need to know that they have the following types of tissues. So there's 4 types of tissues, if you remember. A cells are basic unit. A group of cells will make up a tissue. Group of tissues make up an organ. Group of organs make up an organ system. So there's 4 types of tissues: epithelial, muscular. So you have epithelial, muscular, connective, and nervous. So those are 4 types of tissues that are going to be found in most animals. And we're going to give kind of a definition of each one of these tissues. So epithelial will cover the body surfaces, so like your skin. Muscle tissues contain proteins that enable them to contract. So the muscle tissues have are contractile, which allows the animals to move. So that's the main function of the muscle tissue, is to make animals move. Connective tissue support an animal's body and connect its parts. That's pretty simple. And nervous tissue contains nerve cells, again pretty simple, which carry information throughout the body. So those are 4 types of tissues, and we'll hit on these more in class about what each one of them are, but it's pretty simple if you kind of have a basic understanding of what the words mean. And so to kind of continue on with what is an animal, so the first type of animal that we're going to look at are called invertebrates, and these make up 95% of all animal species. So they dominate the animal kingdom. And these are animals that do not have a backbone or vertebral column. So invertebrate, without a vertebrae. That's what that means. Hopefully you've heard that term before. And they just give some examples that include sea stars, worms, jellyfishes, and insects. So these are just kind of some simple examples of invertebrates that we're going to kind of see. And so now we're going to take a look at the other 5% of animals, and these are going to be vertebrates, meaning that they do have a backbone. So invertebrates, no backbone; vertebrates have a backbone. Pretty simple. And the examples they give are fishes, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. So we're going to hit on all of those later on in the year, but just know that those are all vertebrate animals, meaning they do have a backbone. So then we're going to finish off this video with what animals do to survive, and there's going to be 7, I believe, essential functions that all animals have to carry out in order for them to survive. And so these include feeding, respiration, circulation, excretion, response, movement, be careful with this one because not all animals do move, but most of them do, and reproduction. Okay, sorry about that. Movement and reproduction. And so we're going to take a look at first one being feeding. So feeding just starts out with herbivores eat plants, so that's pretty simple. Carnivores eat other animals, hopefully we already know this. And omnivores will feed on both plants and animals. So those 3 words I think you've probably all heard before. And then the one that we might not have heard before, we actually probably mentioned it with fungus, is that detrivores, or could be decomposers, but in terms of animals, they'd be called a detrivore. They feed on decaying plant and animal material. So kind of like a vulture or something like that would be considered a detrivore, because it's just going to kind of eat roadkill. And filter feeders are aquatic animals that strain tiny floating organisms from water. So those are the 5 different ways that animals can feed. And then All animals also form symbiotic relationships in which two species will live in close association with each other. So that's just saying they can kind of get food from other animals as well. Our next one is respiration, saying whether they live in water or on land, all animals respire, and that simply means they take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide or CO2. So all animals have to take in oxygen and give off CO2. Circulation is that's going to be described by the fact that animals will transport oxygen, nutrient molecules, and waste products among all their cells through either simple diffusion or some kind of circulatory system. So they have to get oxygen in, they have to transport nucleus, and they have to get waste out in some way, shape, or form. An excretion is going to be ammonia, is going to be the main waste product of cells, and it's a very poisonous substance. And so most animals will have an excretory system that eliminates ammonia quickly so it won't hurt the animal, or it'll convert it into a less toxic substance that is removed from the body. So animals have to have some way to remove ammonia from their body or convert ammonia and then remove it from their body. Our next one is response. Animals will respond to events in their environment using specialized cells called nerve cells, and in most cells a nerve cell form a nervous system. So that's basic there. Our first groups of animals are going to kind of go against this a little bit, but we'll get more in detail with that later on. And then they have receptor cells that will respond to sound, light, and external stimuli, and other nerve cells will process information and determine how our animal will respond. So that's just the fact that the difference between a rock and an animal is if you hit a rock, nothing happens. If you hit an animal, there's going to be some type of response that's going to be stimulated. Our next one is movement. Again, this one does not apply to all animals. That's our first sentence here, is that some animals do stay at a single spot, but most can move, and most animals have muscles or muscle-like tissue, and that's how they are going to move. And then the muscles actually move by contracting, which will enable motile, which just means you have the ability to move, animals to move around by walking in combination with support structures called a skeleton. So most animals are able to move through the contraction of muscles and through the support of a skeleton. And then muscles will also even help sedentary animals feed and pump water and fluids through their bodies. So sedentary are animals that are not going to move. And then reproduction. Most animals reproduce sexually, meaning they have another partner, and this will help to create and maintain genetic diversity in populations, and it will improve their species' abilities to evolve when the environment changes. So if we just have animals reproducing in one group with one another, then they're going to kind of all have the same traits, and then if something happens, boom, they all die off. So if they kind of spread out a little bit, mate with people from all over, then it'll help maintain their diversity and help them evolve. And many invertebrates can also reproduce asexually, meaning without a partner, and this will produce offspring that are genetically identical to the parent, and it allows animals to increase their numbers rapidly. So they can produce asexually, but most is sexually. And we're going to start our next video with what are important trends in animal evolution that help us understand them today. So sorry this one was a little bit longer. Let me know if you have any questions.